Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever wondered why the exact same political strategies seem to pop up across totally different issues? It's uncanny, right? Today, we're objectively breaking down a really fascinating source document that details a highly structured, repeatable cycle used in modern political governance. We're going to look at the exact architecture behind how major policies are introduced, implemented, and then defended in the public square.
So the crucial point here is that policy strategies aren't just random reactions to the daily news cycle, not at all. According to our source document, they're actually engineered around a highly mechanical, predictable three-step loop. Think of it kind of like a political engine. It's a very calculated method, specifically designed to generate public support up front and then strategically manage the inevitable exhaust or political fallout later on down the road.
Okay, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First up, the Democratic Policy Playbook. Then, Step 1, framing the crisis, Step 2, immediate benefits, and Step 3, managing costs. After that, we'll look at exactly why the strategy works, and finally, wrap up with the structural risks.
All right, let's jump right into Part 1, the Democratic Policy Playbook. Now, our source analyzes what it specifically identifies as a Democratic Policy Playbook. It describes this whole thing as a repeatable cycle that's really become both a governing and an electoral strategy. It basically moves sequentially through 3 steps. Step 1, you frame a systemic crisis. Step 2, you deliver immediate, highly targeted benefits to the public. And Step 3, you manage the fiscal and political costs that inevitably follow, usually by coming up with new promises of affordability and efficiency.
So let's break down Step 1, framing the crisis. This first step relies almost entirely on language and public perception. To mobilize really large-scale government action, issues just can't be framed as your everyday routine policy challenges. Instead, they're intentionally framed in these stark existential terms. For instance, the source points out the frequent use of the term climate emergency, right? Extreme weather, wildfires, floods, they're all presented as urgent existential threats that absolutely demand immediate intervention. And this brilliantly illustrates the pattern across totally different sectors, too. We see the exact same linguistic strategy applied everywhere. Whether it's the student debt crisis, focusing on college unaffordability and wealth gaps, or the housing affordability crisis, highlighting rent burdens and zoning-driven scarcity. Notice how that specific word, crisis, is deliberately used here. It's used to justify bypassing the normal, usually much slower legislative processes in favor of immediate, sweeping action.
Moving right along to Step 2, immediate benefits.
Now look at how these benefits are actually designed. They aren't just abstract policy goals floating around out there in the ether. They are incredibly direct personal wins aimed right at specific households. If it's the climate emergency, the benefit is massive subsidies and tax credits for electric vehicles or home electrification rebates. If it's the student debt crisis, well, the benefit is payment pauses or targeted forgiveness. Housing, it's rental assistance or eviction moratoria. From expanded child tax credits to targeted work permits under DACA, the strategy here is absolutely clear. Create visible winners who feel the relief quickly and directly in their own everyday lives.
But of course, that brings us to Step 3, managing costs. Because in governance, every action has a reaction, right? When the bill for these targeted benefits eventually comes due, it usually arrives in the form of diffuse, widespread costs. The source notes this can look like green inflation, higher utility bills, or just broader worries about the national deficit. When this backlash hits, the strategy has to pivot. The focus suddenly shifts to managing those costs, with brand new messaging centered entirely on affordability, maybe offering ratepayer protections or targeting corporate price gouging. It's all about shifting the blame and blunting the impact of those costs. Take a look at this macroscopic view provided by our source. It's actually pretty wild. Across entirely different sectors, from climate all the way down to labor and taxes, this exact same crisis, benefit, and backlash pattern just perfectly repeats itself. For labor, the crisis is inequality, the benefit is a minimum wage push or childcare subsidies, and the backlash is business cost complaints and inflation. For immigration, the crisis is humanitarian, the benefit is targeted legal protections, and the backlash is fiscal strains on local services. It is a highly mechanized loop applied universally across the entire policy board. Which leads us to Part 5, why this strategy actually works. And this brings us to a really fantastic academic concept highlighted in the research called salience asymmetry. Basically, it means voters deeply feel immediate personal wins, like a tax credit hitting their bank account. They know exactly who gave it to them. Conversely, the costs, like the national budget deficit, well, those are diffuse and delayed.
It's just human nature, right? We celebrate the immediate reward and we completely ignore the distant bill.
But the genius of this strategy goes even further than that. First, you get what's called constituency lock-in. Delivering a new benefit creates a highly dedicated group of people that will fiercely defend it, which makes repealing it incredibly politically costly. Second is agenda control. Ironically enough, if a subsidy causes prices to rise, that new inflation actually justifies the next round of government interventions, which expands the policy footprint even further. It literally just feeds itself.
However, let's look at part 6, the structural risks.
Because this mechanical loop isn't invincible. The risk all comes down to the narrative. When hidden delayed costs become visible all at once, imagine sudden utility bill spikes, massive rent increases, or severe tax shocks. The public narrative can violently flip. The story can shift literally overnight from narrative A, where policymakers solved the crisis, straight to narrative B, where the public suddenly realizes they created a costly dependency. If the cost control measures fail to deliver tangible relief, the very voters who praised those immediate benefits will turn around and punish the policymakers for those delayed costs.
So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. As these policies accumulate across climate, housing, education, and labor, they naturally begin to overlap. What happens to this entire governing strategy when the hidden, delayed costs of multiple crises finally accumulate and become visible, all at the exact same time? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the structures behind the policies we see every single day.